Reincarnated as the Frog Prince, Chapter 1. Reality is just a shitty game. 16-year-old Japanese high school student Gamaken Kuronuma groused as he remembered the favorite saying of a certain anime character who would gain the nickname God of Conquest for his prowess in being able to beat almost any dating sim game. Even though he was a fictional character, Gamaken really looked up to this guy and his ability to get the girls, even if those girls were also 2D characters. Gamaken's fingers were flying across his keyboard as he played a fantasy-themed MMORPG on his computer. The game was better than its current reality in his opinion. Gamaken let out a defeated and somewhat disappointed sigh as he watched the knight he was playing die on screen. If I were a certain black swordsman trapped inside a virtual reality game, then I'd really be dead. Gamaken was currently in a dark mood since he had recently decided to stop going to school. This was due to the fact that his classmates had been bullying him relentlessly for being an overweight anime and game otaku. Being bullied was nothing new to the nerdy Gamaken, but what was new is that he was unfortunately learning firsthand that as kids grew older, they also grew more violent and devious in their bullying methods. When Gamaken had been bullied in middle school, he just had to put up with his classmates verbally teasing him because of his geeky hobbies and interest in anime, video games, cute anime figures of girls from his favorite shows, and gal games, a type of dating sim game that involved interactions with pretty anime-styled girls. As soon as Gamaken entered high school, his fellow classmates immediately made him their errand boy. They would order Gamaken to go and buy them drinks or buy them lunch even if they didn't have any money. During his third year of high school, they started to steal his lunch money and beat him up for fun. His classmates enjoyed humiliating Gamaken and would come up with inventive ways to do so. Gamaken shuddered as he remembered this one time they had ordered him to strip down to his boxers and then made him make a talking face with the flab on his stomach. Gamaken thought he could still hear their cruel laughter ringing in his ears. In Japanese high schools, it was customary for a student to leave their outdoor shoes inside of a shoe locker and put on plastic shoes, which they would wear around the school. At the end of the school day, Gamaken would sometimes find sharp tacks or disgusting live earthworms in his shoes. But that definitely wasn't the worst thing they had ever done to poor Gamaken. His classmates started to come up with games such as the ever-popular How Many Kicks to Gama's Stomach Before He Throws Up, or How Many Slaps Before He Cries, and lastly, How Long Can We Choke Him Until His Face Turns Blue? It was this last game that caused Gamaken to fear going to school, and he decided it would be safer to quit and stay home. It's not like I have parents to tell me I have to go to school anyways, Gamaken mumbled to himself as he watched his knight respawn on screen. And it's not like anyone is going to miss me. I doubt they even noticed that I stopped going. I wonder if Sabomi-chan noticed my absence. Yeah, right. Gamaken let out a wistful sigh. Allegedly, Gamaken's father had abandoned him and his mother when he was just a baby. As for his mother, Midori Kuronuma, she had passed away recently. Gamaken remembered her always being sick. It was unclear what she had been sick with, but one time Gamaken could have sworn he saw her coughing up bloody cherry blossom petals. Midori had never been healthy, and having to work multiple jobs so that she could raise a son all by herself probably hadn't done anything good for her health. Gamaken remembered his mother as being someone who was always moving and never still. Even when his mother arrived home from her day job, she'd sit and talk to Gamaken while assembling fake silk flowers for extra money. Midori used to joke that she was like the princess in the fairy tale story Rumpelstiltskin, who was able to spin straw into gold using an enchanted spinning wheel. Midori would twist the leaves onto fake flowers, and after mailing a box of flowers back to the flower shop, she'd be rewarded, not with gold, but with money. Midori had loved fairy tales. They had been her escape from reality. Gamaken's mother used to read him classic fairy tales such as The History of Jack and the Giant, The Sleeping Beauty in the Wood, The Little Red Riding Hood, The Master Cat, Puss in Boots, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, and more. When Gama had first started getting bullied at school, his fellow classmates had shortened his name from Gamaken, which means frog sword, to Kamoi Gama, creepy frog, or simply Gama. Later, his mother had learned about this and decided to comfort him by telling him the fairy tale story of the Frog Prince with a strange air of seriousness about her. Gama remembered that particular day as if it were yesterday. "Oh, my darling boy, I'm so sorry to hear how your fellow classmates have been treating you. But don't lose hope. One day you will meet people with the ability to see the real you, just like the princess in The Frog Prince, who was able to see past the prince's cursed appearance and accept him for who he truly was. These people will become your closest friends," his mother explained in a tone of voice that brooked no argument. Gama, who had been lying in bed and getting ready to sleep, blinked drowsily up at his mother and tried to stifle a yawn. "The Frog Prince? Is that another fairy tale? I haven't heard that one yet. Will you tell it to me?" "Of course, I will tell you the story. I've been saving it because, well, it may be important to you one day to know this particular fairy tale story. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful yet spoiled young princess. Every day, the princess would go outside near the Forest of Gloom to a stream to cool down and play with her favorite possession, a golden ball." Gama laughed and accidentally let out a snort. "A golden ball? That doesn't sound like a fun toy. It sounds very impractical." Midori smiled crookedly. "Well, she probably just liked that it was shiny. Anyways, one day the princess accidentally dropped the ball and it rolled into the stream. She immediately began to cry and lament her ball's loss. The sound of the princess's crying drew the attention of a small green frog with a tiny golden crown on its head." Gama raised an eyebrow at his mother. "A crown? Really? Wouldn't it just fall off?" Midori giggled. "It would have if the frog hadn't been magical. The frog told the princess her tears had moved him to pity, and he asked her what was wrong. The princess explained that she had dropped her golden ball into the stream, and told the frog if he could but fetch it for her, she would gladly reward him with whatever he desired. She offered him jewels and even her fine clothes, but the frog explained that he had no use for such things. What he wanted was merely the privilege to become her closest friend and live in the castle with her." "A frog in a castle?" Gama snorted. "Yes, the princess thought it was a silly request for a frog to make too," Midori said as she reached out and ruffled Gama's hair playfully. "How could a frog live among humans after all? The princess agreed to the deal, believing there was no way the frog could leave his stream and his fellow frogs behind. The frog quickly fetched the princess her golden ball and gave it to her. She was so happy that she immediately ran back to the castle with it, and completely forgot about her promise to the frog." "Girls." Gama rolled his eyes. "They don't keep their promises." There was a slightly bitter note to Gama's voice as he remembered one girl in particular from his childhood. They used to play together in a nearby park and had promised to always play together. However, when Gama started being bullied for being chubby, the girl began to pretend that she didn't know him. A glint formed in Midori's eyes. "Keeping one's promises is extremely important. Remember that, Gama." That same night, the frog arrived at the castle and knocked on the door, which interrupted a quiet dinner that the princess was having with her father, the king. The princess decided to answer the door, and when she saw that it was the frog, she grew so startled that she slammed the door right in his face. When the princess returned to the dining room and took her seat at the table, the king noticed she looked rather pale and asked if a giant had come to take her away. "A giant?" Gama asked, his eyes widening slightly. "Oh, yes. In these fairy tale worlds, giants and trolls have a thing for kidnapping beautiful princesses and taking them back to their cave lairs. The giants and trolls usually force the princesses to marry them, and then they are treated like slaves, having to cook and clean for the monsters." "That would suck," Gama said, feeling sympathetic for the kidnapped girls. "Usually, a valiant knight will rescue a damsel in distress from a troll, but that's really a story for another time." The princess explained to her father what had happened and what she had promised the frog. Her father instantly reprimanded her and said that she needed to keep her word. The princess was forced to let the frog into the castle and had him follow her to the dining room. The princess cringed when she could hear the splish-splash sound of the frog following her. "Splish-splash?" Gama asked with a cheeky grin. Midori smiled. "A frog's feet tend to be wet, so he would make a squishy kind of sound as he walked or hopped. Anyways, the frog hopped up on the chair next to hers and then onto the table. He began to eat with the princess from her tiny golden plate. After the frog was full, he told the princess that he was sleepy and asked her to carry him up to her room. The princess tried to refuse at first, since she didn't want to have to touch a slimy frog. However, her father the king reprimanded her, and she was forced to carry the frog to her room and even allowed him to sleep on her bed. On her bed? Gama suddenly cried. She really let a slimy frog sleep on her bed? Oh, yes! The frog slept on her pillow and right by her head. Midori explained. The next day, the princess and frog spent the entire day together, and the princess began to find that she didn't mind his company. She had never realized how lonely she was until she had the frog for a constant companion. When the princess read a book aloud to the frog, she was both impressed and entertained by his wise comments. 3 days passed by in this manner, and on the third night, the princess decided to give the frog a goodnight kiss. Ew, Gama said, cringing and putting his face in his hands. She really kissed a frog? He gave his mother a wide-eyed look. Midori nodded. Yes, she did. When the princess woke up the next day, however, it was to find a handsome prince standing at the foot of her bed. The prince explained that he had been cursed by the Goblin King, who had been jealous of his handsome face, and that the only way to break the curse had been for a princess to bestow upon him true love's kiss. True love's kiss? Gama asked sleepily. When the princess had given her new best friend a kiss, she had unknowingly broken his curse by being able to see past his cursed appearance and for liking him for who he truly was. The prince told the princess that if she would do the honor of marrying him, he'd happily whisk her away to his kingdom as his bride. The princess, who had already become close friends with the frog, decided that the prince would make a perfect life companion and quickly agreed. That's a nice story, Gama murmured, turning on his side and preparing to sleep. Oh, it's not over just yet, Midori chided, placing a hand on Gama's shoulder. That's when a carriage pulled by 7 white horses arrived at the castle, along with the prince's loyal attendant, Henry. Henry? Gama asked with a curious note to his voice. That's the same name as my pet snake. Poor Henry had been so distraught at his master's cruel fate that he had wrapped 3 metal bands around his heart so that he couldn't feel anything. Midori revealed. How do you wrap 3 metal bands around your heart? Gama asked skeptically. With magic, Midori explained with a twinkle in her green eyes. The prince hadn't been aware of the fact that Henry's life was in danger, but thanks to the princess keeping her promise, Henry's life was saved. The prince and princess entered the carriage, and Henry began to drive them to the prince's kingdom. Henry was so happy that his master had found true love, and that the curse had finally been broken that his heart swelled. A cracking sound filled the air as one of the metal bands around his heart broke. The prince became worried at the sound, thinking a part of the carriage had been broken, but Henry assured the prince the carriage was fine. 2 more times a loud cracking sound filled the air, but dear loyal Henry told the prince not to worry about it. Why did Henry care so much? Gama asked, his brow furrowing. Henry was the prince's best friend, Midori explained. One day you will have a best friend like Henry. I sure hope so. One day you'll also meet a girl who won't care if you're a little chubby or an otaku, Midori assured softly. She'll simply like you for you. But in order for that to happen, you can't judge people by their appearances either, Gama. Judge people by their actions. The last thing Gama remembered was his mother smoothing his hair over his forehead before he fell asleep.